Welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast. I'm Tyler,
I'm Jesse.
And I'm Eli.
and we're your number one Orioles podcast. Not really, but that just sounds cool to say when podcasts say that. So we're
Number one in your hearts.
yeah, we're an Orioles podcast.
We are exactly one Orioles podcast.
Yeah,
I am not going to be able to get over this intro for a while. Okay, this is a great intro. I love it. I gotta say.
well, thank you, Jesse. It just came to me to say that we are one of the Orioles podcasts out there, and we appreciate you for listening to us. You're one of the 3,000 or so folks that listens to us on a bi-monthly basis, so we really appreciate it.
Yeah, we don't count them exactly, but yeah.
Yeah, it hovers. It hovers. Jesse likes to ask about the stats right before we hit the record button. So those are fresh off.
Well, if we're a baseball podcast, we got to care about the stats, right? I mean, that's what baseball is all about, right?
Well, you got to run your own race, Jess. You got to run your own race. So that's what we do here. We don't look at anything. We don't even listen to our own podcast to check for quality assurance. We just plow ahead around here.
Yep.
Anyway.
All right.
This is an Orioles podcast, and since we last recorded, if these stats are to be believed, right, Jess, on our outline that Eli has put together for us, the Orioles are 8-6 since our last recording. We are currently recording during a game at the moment, so that could change a little bit between recording and release, but they've split a 4-game series with the Angels. They swept a series in Toronto, which was huge. Took 2 out of 3 from another big series against the Yankees, lost 2 out of 3 to the Rangers, and then yesterday, before recording now, they lost the opening game of this series with the Guardians. That's become a theme for the Orioles lately, is losing the opening game of a series after they had won the opening game of like the first 13 series of the year.
Yeah, the exact reverse, right?
Yeah,
and I mean, we are winning this game 7-1 right now, so it's looking good, but
Yeah,
you never know.
High confidence that it'll end well.
absolutely.
Especially with this Guardians offense.
It's pretty rough. I mean, it's any team in the AL Central right now is kind of fun to play because I think it's still accurate now to say every team in the AL East would be leading the AL Central record-wise. I think the Blue Jays would be tied with the Twins or something.
Yeah, the Blue Jays would be tied with the Twins right now. And yeah, it's been a meme for a couple of weeks now that if you just take a screenshot, because the AL East, AL Central, and AL West are always in that order in the standings. If you just take a screenshot of the first two, it's like one big division listed in the correct descending order.
Yeah, I mean,
like how it used to be when it was just the AL and the NL, right?
Exactly.
Right. Well, plus the West. You'd have to have the
West.
West.
Right, not including the West.
Yeah. So not quite.
I was just going to give it to him and move on.
Just move on. But so we get some games against the Guardians this week. Hopefully get a couple wins. Maybe see some future trade targets. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But the big news of the week happened on Monday. Unfortunately, Cedric Mullins exited the game with a grade 2 strain in his groin. That was in the abductor muscle. I wouldn't have known where that was, so it's in the groin. So that's cool to know. And he suffered it while running out a ground ball that Jesse says he would have beaten out normally, right, Jess? That's
he clearly would have beat that out. Yes, absolutely.
But he didn't and is now on the IL. For the moment, it's a 10-day IL. However, apparently Brandon Hyde said there was some good news there on the scans, and his timeout's going to be measured in weeks rather than months. Now, how many weeks? We don't know. It could be 6 weeks because that's fewer than 2 months, which would still be a bummer. But huge blow. Do we want to talk about the blow that just losing Cedric Mullins is first, I think, before we get into the move that happened today? Eli, I mean, how big of a deal is it that the Orioles lost Cedric Mullins for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I went ahead and just like quickly scanned Baseball Reference and Fangraphs just to get the overall picture. And it was kind of hilarious. Cedric is this rare point of harmony between the two. He's got 1.8 B-WAR and F-WAR, and their offensive metrics, OPS plus and WRC plus, he's 32% better than league average on both of them. He obviously provides defensive value. Baseball Savant has him in the 91st percentile for outs above average. You know, the guy just like is a steady contributor in every facet of the game. He has played every game this year leading up to this point, and it cannot be understated how much the team is going to miss him. You know, I think there are It is either him or Adley that is the most valuable presence in the lineup. I think we all pretty much agree it's Adley, but having him setting the table every single day uh, cannot be understated the impact that it has, and he's been just phenomenal this year. So it definitely hurts. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's all there is to say. Yeah.
No, I mean he's what was it 2 years ago he was the best, one of the best center fielders in the league, took a bit of a step back last year, and now this year looked closer to that 2021 version of himself. I mean, huge loss, defense, offense, leadership, all that kind of stuff. I'm sure he'll still be around the team, obviously, so there could still be that aspect of it. But yeah, I mean, it's a bummer. I mean, Jess, do you want to add anything there as to what the loss means?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Orioles have become so reliant on him since he's been on the Orioles. And I mean, this is his first time even on the IL for the Orioles. So missing any sort of any extended period of time at all. This is the first time we're experiencing this with Mullins. I gotta say, I always sort of wonder how these midseason injuries end up impacting things long term. I always wonder if the rest could be in the long term useful for Mullins, and by extension the Orioles, if we do end up in the playoffs and he comes back a little bit fresher and a little bit not as worn down from the grueling 162 game season that all the players go through. I think about this with pitchers more so, right? I think that's a sort of more natural conversation for pitchers, but I definitely think it applies to position players too. So, hopefully we can, maybe we can look really closely and in the future foresee a small silver lining that comes out of this. But it's definitely going to be difficult, and the 8 week stretch it's going to impact things because, right, we're now getting just straight off like a worse leadoff hitter, and then Frazier, who would normally be hitting whatever 7 or 8 for us, is now going to be hitting 1. So we're going to probably have a weaker 7 or 8 hitter to replace Frazier. So it just sort of messes up the whole thing. And of course, Frazier's OBP is not going to be as well, is not going to be as high. So Rutschman and Hayes and Mountcastle, the hitters that follow Mullins normally, won't have the same number of guys on base in front of them. So offensively, it's just a problem. And then, yeah, like, of course, the outfield configuration now. Hayes should, will probably do a pretty decent job covering for him in center, but then that also, he's moving over from left. So if it's not McKenna in left, we're probably going to have a slightly worse defense in the outfield. And so, yeah, it just, all that to say, it just messes things up for the Orioles. It just makes things worse, and it makes the Orioles a worse team than they were with Mullins. So,
yeah, the trickle down economics of an injury in baseball.
I was going to say the butterfly effect, but that works too, because trickle down economics, as we all know, isn't a thing. That doesn't work. Whereas Cedric Mullins does work at the top of the lineup. So that's the difference there.
Right.
But I want to go back to what you said about getting some rest, Jess, for the long stretch run, because I think there's some validity there. There's obviously you don't want to play or hurt, but when they're rehabbing or working out or whatever to get back from an injury, they're not putting themselves through the grueling season that they normally would. I think this is not relevant to Mullins in particular, but I think the Orioles had a couple of Ravens players at the game a few weeks ago or whatever, and I think it was Marlon Humphrey, who, if anybody's a Ravens fan that listens, he's a bit of a goofball and he's always good for a quote or whatever, but he said he was talking to Grayson Rodriguez, who's going to be another topic here in just a second, and Grayson was telling him, like, after a start, my body hurts, like, for the entire 5 days it takes for me to recover from that outing, and that's real, and that's a rookie who is as young as any player in the league and is as fresh as possible. He hurts. Now it's not probably quite as significant for a position player because they're not literally putting 100% effort into every single pitch of a game, but still
90 to 100 times over and
right.
over.
But the
Right.
principle is the same, and I'm sure they are worn down day after day. It's been a topic on this podcast recently, and I think even some chatter online of how little time off some of the Orioles' most important players get. Adley Rutschman I think he just had his first day off yesterday. We were talking before. Mullins, I think prior to this, had maybe had one day off the whole season. Mountcastle doesn't get very many days off. Adam Frazier now doesn't get many days off. And I don't know if that's something that the Orioles want to revisit a little bit and say, hey, it's okay to give guys a day off. I'm not saying Mullins got hurt because of that, but I don't think it probably helped at all. So I don't know, Jess, if you have any thoughts in terms of like how the Orioles are using their players. I know we did talk about this probably a month ago, maybe a little less than that. But I don't know if you have any thoughts there in terms of that and as a contributing factor to a Mullins injury potentially.
I mean, I think we talked about it last podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's impossible to know whether the lack of rest really created this injury. Whether I mean, to me, it seems like more of a stretching sort of issue, right? I mean, like, I'm not a doctor or anything, but when someone pulls up like he did, right? Most of the time to me that seems like something was tense or something was not properly stretched out or he got stiff a little bit or I have no idea. So it's hard to say whether that it's impossible to know whether another couple or 3 days off would have helped Mullins prevent that sort of injury. But with that said, right, I mean, I think it's clear that the overall long-term health of the players is a question. And I mean, sort of 162 game season is we're playing the long game here, not trying to go hard to win every single game at maximum capacity and treat every game like it's game 4 of the World Series. So yeah, I mean, I think it's important that the Orioles start sort of making some differences, some adjustments. And I mean, I think kind of at least my philosophy on it, right, is that if you don't worry about the long-term health of the players, you're gonna, I mean, again, not to say the injury was caused by it, but things like what happened to Mullins are going to happen to other players, and you're going to lose them whether you like it or not. And you're going to lose them not in a way that is on your terms. They're just going to be shut down and inactive and injured. So I would prefer picking and choosing situations where you can sort of compensate for, to the best of your ability, compensate for Adley Rutschman taking a day off or Mountcastle taking a day off, finding the right matchup, finding the right day of the week, et cetera, rather than pushing these guys to the brink where they where they get shut down and then you have no control over how they're used or utilized. They're just out and that's it, and you have to suffer.
Yeah, fair enough. Eli, anything to add there?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Elias just had some comments earlier today, or maybe it was yesterday, talking about how the Orioles were going to get through the year with their starting pitchers. And one thing that he alluded to was, basically with the likes of Bradish, Kramer, Grayson, Tyler Wells, none of these guys have thrown even like 120 innings in a year. And he said, obviously, we can't shut down 4/5 of our rotation partway through the year, especially in the midst of a playoff chase. So, I just want to give credit and say, I don't think that this is something that there's a lack of foresight. Clearly the team is aware and concerned about it. The things that I've kind of thought about in my head is because this division is currently so wildly competitive, I think that the Orioles might be in the mindset that we need to push ourselves to stay in it for this early portion of the year until we can solidify ourselves as contenders, maybe, through the trade deadline, which again, we'll talk about later. But it sounds like to me, we might be pushing for this early portion of the year, and then hopefully we'll get some reinforcements and a little bit more depth in the lineup. People talk about having a long lineup in the sense of you have to face 1 through 9 equally as, 1 through 9 in the lineup is equally as challenging to the opposing pitcher. Clearly we don't have that right now. So if we could get some length into the lineup, so to speak, maybe through prospect promotions, maybe through reinforcements at the deadline, if we can get that extra arm into the rotation, these kinds of things can do what Jesse is talking about and, create those situations where you can give people days off without totally decimating your chances at winning the game. That said, at the same time, we were talking about before this last night, we're losing 5-0 in the bottom of the ninth with 2 outs, and Adley Rutschman goes up into the on-deck circle, and yesterday was the first game that he didn't play, but down 5-0 with 1 out to play with is not really the time to me that we need to make sure Adley gets into the game. And, it's not like a critical situation. And we did talk about this last pod, but, just finding these situations where you can tell somebody that they're completely shut down for the day, they get the mental relaxation as well as the physical. I think that goes an incredibly long way. I think what Jesse said about pulling the muscle being a stretching thing, there's more finesse than that, and I'm sure they stretch out plenty well before every game. But it's there are elements of fatigue. There are elements of there are thousands and thousands of elements, I guess is the point, a multitude of factors that go into these kinds of injuries. And, we can't say it definitively, like we have mentioned. We can't say it definitively, but it can only help your chances to have had a day or 2 off. And that's the reason that you barely see any players playing 162 games anymore. It just doesn't make sense to push somebody to the absolute brink. It's the reason, Shohei is proving himself a wild, wild talent, but it's the reason that when he first started doing this double duty, he would not hit on the same day that he pitched, and then the next day was an off day altogether, and he was only pitching every 6 days, and et cetera, et cetera. You find ways to protect your assets, you find ways to lighten the load, wherever possible. And it does seem like the Orioles have not been doing that for whatever reason. Again, there might be some long-term strategy behind it, but it definitely seems like a shortcoming right now.
I just want to make a comment real quick. So the thing I'm curious about, though, is you're saying the Orioles, of course, are trying to boost, get as many wins, seize as many wins at this point in the season. And I get what you're saying about the starting pitching and the starting pitch. I'm not saying the Orioles don't have foresight. Of course, I think, the Orioles have thought about these conversations we're discussing. And I get for the pitching, it's easier to say, well, let's bring in reinforcements. But you're not going to want to sit Adley in September or August either. You know what I'm saying? No matter what position players you get to compensate for, you wouldn't even get another catcher, because we have McCann, right? So if we're just using Adley as an example, right? There's no day in September or August where it's going to make more strategic sense, I don't think, than these games to have Adley get a rest day now. Right. So I get what you're saying about the reinforcements for the pitchers, but for the position players, I don't see that argument as much.
Well, but the point is, if you've got Colton Cowser up and he's hitting 350, not to say that's definitely going to happen, but if that happens,
it's unlikely to happen. But yeah, go ahead.
Or if you bring in, what I will say is I think the Orioles are very much going to be in the hunt for the best value that they can get their hands on. Clearly the need is pitching, and I think they will address that, but we're going to be buyers at the deadline, and we have an insane amount of prospect capital right now. So to kick the tires on some controllable, high level position players as well, I think I think that should be expected. And if we were to bring somebody in, it's not to say that it will ever make sense for that game right there to sit Adley, but I'm going to throw a name out there, and this is obviously not going to happen, but just bear with me. If Ronald Acuna Jr. is on the team, then your lineup looks much better without Adley in it than it does, right now. That's all I'm saying. So that, like another big bat in the lineup to cushion the blow of Adley sitting is all that I'm talking about.
Yeah, but I think you're making these like hypothetical I mean, you're not demonstrating to me, because like you said, Acuna won't be on the team in the future, right? So it's
okay, but
that's not going to be what the equation is. So, but
okay,
what I'm saying is, I don't think it's seriously going to improve in the future than it is now, with the position, whatever position players the Orioles are going to pick up at the deadline.
Well, I mean, you said.
I mean, I think that's like. I mean, it's conjecture either way, saying they will bring in someone who will move the needle or won't. But I'm just saying, I think that's probably the calculus, is that once we are able to lengthen our lineup a little bit later in the year and add some better players to fill in the 5, 6, 7 holes, that is when we will be able to sit Adley and still be able to play a competitive game, given that maybe our ace is on the mound, given that we have favorable setups in other ways,
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, so 2 quick last things. I would just say that one, because the Orioles are playing so well right now, I actually think it would make sense and be advantageous now to find a day here and there when the matchup looks good to give them a day off instead than to try to push it now. And, so I've made that clear. Secondly, though, I also just want to point out that yeah, I mean, and the point you did make about Adley being in the on deck circle in the 5-0 game, the first game he got off or didn't play in, right? Like, it's just to make the point, it's not Hyde. Adley is chilling the whole game on the bench, and Hyde says, "Hey, pick up a bat." I mean, in the 6th, 7th inning, right? Adley probably had a sense that he might get used, was probably told it was a possibility he would get into the game, and then he had to start mentally preparing and then physically preparing to get into the game. So, yeah, I mean, it just demonstrates the problems with how this is going right now for the O's.
Yeah, let's just talk about Aaron Hicks real quick. So that's the move the Orioles made to take Cedric Mullins' roster spot. They had a free 40-man roster spot, so they didn't have to make a move there. But Hicks comes in; he'll be making the major league minimum for the rest of the season. There was some consternation about this online. It seemed right away. People don't love the move. Just to give you guys some background, Hicks was with the Yankees to start the season, was really bad, had a slash line of 188, 263, 261 with 1 home run, 2 doubles, 7 walks to 20 strikeouts. Eli, what are your expectations for Aaron Hicks for the rest of the season? And then I can kind of give my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think that we really should not expect, the Aaron Hicks that approached 30 bombs a couple years ago. It's like I think that he is now in a situation where he's over the hump, he's on his decline, but the fact of the matter still stands that he is like a solid defensive outfielder. I think that he is, he's a veteran. He will step in and he will be a known quantity, as opposed to, like Kowser right now is on the injured list. We have theoretically Kyle Stowers. He's also on the injured list. You have the option of bringing up one of our infield prospects and slotting Terran Vavra out in the corner outfield, or slotting Adam Frazier out there. Both of them are relatively unknown quantities out in the outfield as well. So I think what this does is it just brings stability. I think that it is a known quantity. That said, I'm not convinced it's really like a better solution than any of the other things I just mentioned. Even if you were just to like wait it out until a Stowers or a Kowser could come up, once they get off of their injured list stints. But I think that, I see why the Orioles wanted to do it. I see the value he provides in just being somebody who's been around in competitive scenarios, will provide solid defensive value. And that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think my take on it is simply that it's given all the current situation which you just laid out, Eli, with the injuries down in AAA. Mullins is out, weeks not months. They don't really have another obvious center fielder option on the current roster. I know Hayes is going to slide over there and McKenna can play on occasion, but I think just given the context, this seems like a fine move. He's not going to be good, and if they brought him in, and we'll see. Today's the first day they've had him. He's on the bench. If they bring him in and kind of just view him as like Cedric 2.0 and start him every day in center, and he leads off or whatever, obviously that's going to be an issue. They can't approach things that way. But I think if you just view him as like a fifth outfielder who, like, you'll pick your spots, you'll start him a day here and there, you'll start McKenna a day here and there, Hayes a day here and there in center, I think it seems fine just to buy you enough time to get somebody to come back. So that's the only point where, like, I think everybody online freaking out about it and saying, like, just give Daz Cameron a shot. Like, no, look at like what Daz Cameron has done in the big leagues, and his numbers in AAA aren't even very good. Like, no, as bad as Aaron Hicks has been, I far prefer him on the major league roster than Daz Cameron. But Jess, what do you think about this move?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, like both of you are saying, it's a stopgap solution. I mean, right. In a different situation, I might hold out a tiny bit of hope. I mean, of course, Hicks is, older now and clearly has lost a step from what he used to be. In certain situations, I may hold out some hope that, right, like you could say, well, New York is a tough place to play, even though he played there and succeeded there and had good years there at one point. So you could say, you could make those kind of arguments, and in a different situation, I may reserve some hope that he could turn it around and it could be a new environment and a new situation. And I mean, we talked early in the season about getting left-handed hitters and sort of gearing our offense towards having left-handed hitters. But the fact of the matter is, kind of like you're saying, Tyler, he's just not going to get the playing time, I think, that would even allow him to be in a situation he won't even be given the chance to sort of have a resurgence, right? He won't be given the playing time and the opportunity and stuff like that, right? I don't think he will. So, yeah. So, that, yeah, I mean, kind of like you're both saying, it's just a stopgap for the moment. It's temporary, and if he's on like the Orioles playoff roster or something, like something's gone seriously wrong. So,
yeah, people were comparing it to the Brett Phillips move from last offseason, and in a way, I almost understand the Brett Phillips one more than this one, kind of, but that's a different topic. But
what I will say though is I also think I think there's 0% chance that Aaron Hicks is like our starting center fielder every day for the next 8 weeks while Cedric is out. I don't think that's the situation. So I do think we're going to see a lot of situations like this where it'll be Hayes moving over to center, or McKenna playing center, something of that sort, and us shuffling around in other ways.
Right. I think if McKenna hadn't like fallen apart the last couple of weeks as like he has offensively, I think this move doesn't happen. But because McKenna had started really nice and now it's not going great, I think the Orioles felt like we need to do something because you can't put McKenna out there every day, clearly.
Right.
I mean, we don't have to get into it, but I also don't understand you thinking Phillips made more sense than Hicks. But...
Well, because Phillips obviously like hitting wise, there's no value in Brett Phillips, but defensively, I'd rather have Brett Phillips than Aaron Hicks. And Brett Phillips is one of the fastest players in baseball. So like you can see like situationally, 8th inning, 9th inning, Brett Phillips in center field, I'd almost feel better than, I mean, he's probably even, you could argue he's better than Cedric is in center field defensively. Now, Cedric is a complete package center fielder who is also very good defensively. But whereas Hicks at this point in his career, there's not too many skills that he excels at.
Right.
So, but both of them would be moves on the margin. This isn't going to make or break the Orioles season where that seemed to be the reaction on Twitter, was like, how can they sign this guy? He sucks. The Yankees didn't want him. And it's like, okay, well,
Right.
if he's a fifth outfielder, this doesn't really matter. Like, just pretend it's John Andrioli from 5 years ago or whatever. Like,
Right. Well, yeah,
okay.
and that's what I guess I'm saying I was confused by, because I mean, I think I remember being sort of all of us being baffled by the Phillips move, where this makes sense given injury and et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, well, yeah. In that context, yeah, the when the Phillips move happened.
Right.
But as a player, I can like see, why
you think Phillips was a better player than
sure.
Hicks? Yeah, right.
Situationally,
at this time.
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing I will say just real quick about Aaron Hicks is that his his speed is down below league average. He's in the 48th percentile. And in terms of outfielder jump, he's down in the 30th percentile. So all the stuff we said about defense might have been even a little bit outdated too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he hasn't been playing much this year because he's been struggling so much. And so, I think those are probably small sample sizes, but there is some question as to his defensive ability too.
Sure. I think he still has a good arm, right?
But, yeah, great arm. Great arm.
Right, yeah. I will say there was that moment earlier in the season that was kind of hilarious when Hicks just completely sort of whiffed. He was sort of sliding for the ball, I think, but he just missed it, and it was not that difficult to catch. And Cole was on the mound at the time, and he just rolled his eyes at him. And
we love it.
Yeah, it was kind of hilarious.
Some DJ Stewart vibes,
right?
In the outfield.
Exactly.
All right, let's talk about some more bad news. Grayson Rodriguez struggled again in 3 1/3 innings. That sounded weird. 3 1/3 innings against the Rangers. He had 9 runs, 8 of which were earned on 6 hits, 3 walks, 3 home runs. That's been a real problem for him. Optioned back to AAA Norfolk. For the time being, Keegan Aiken has been recalled, but it's a busy week. They're going to need a starter at some point, or they're going to need to figure out something for that 5th spot in the rotation, currently unoccupied. Eli, I think I'll go to you first, just because we kind of go to you for all the Grayson stuff. But you had said on this podcast, maybe last time we had an episode, you weren't advocating for him to go down. He's had, I think, 2 starts since then. Not great. I think the one in Toronto was okay, and this one was bad. He did go down. Do you think that was the right call?
I do.
Okay.
It's kind of interesting. Dan Connolly wrote an article, and he actually made a pretty valid point. And the point was that Grayson finds himself in positions where he is unable to command the off-speed stuff. And so he resorts back to humping up on the fastball, reaching back for that 98, 99 that we all know he's capable of. And it's got great life. And basically Connolly's argument was that when he does that in AAA, that's going to be a good solution. That is going to work because he can just outclass guys. Because Grayson is better than a AAA pitcher. It's, that's why he's one of the greatest prospects in the game right now. He can go down there and he can, lose command of the slider. He can lose command of the changeup. It can get hit once or twice. And then he can say, all right, my adrenaline's pumping. I'm going to reach back for 99, and that will get him out of the inning. He can get a big time strikeout at the drop of a hat anytime he wants to. And really the issue with him is that with him in the major leagues, when he loses command of the off-speed stuff and he humps up for 99, major league hitters are like, I see 99 75 pitches a game. It's just, Grayson does have a great fastball. He has a plus fastball, maybe even plus. But the fact of the matter is that is not enough, particularly when they know you can't get the slider in the zone. They know that you can't get the changeup in the zone. And, so the thing that he explicitly needs to work on really needs to be worked on in major league games against major league hitters to kind of prove to himself that he's capable of it, to prove to himself that when the time comes that he starts losing command, he can reset and he can once again find that conviction in the off-speed pitches and in his full repertoire as a means of attacking hitters. Because he becomes fastball reliant, and that's when he starts to get hit hard. So I definitely think that I think that Connolly made a good point. That said, the Orioles, have command over what happens in game when somebody goes down to AAA. They are telling the catchers what signs to put down more so than they are at the major league level. Adley is calling games at the major league level. If you go down there, like the game plan will be more heavily scripted for the catchers is the main idea. So if they say, if you see Grayson starting to lose command, maybe that's when you go spend a mound visit and you continue like calling for that slider. You call for the cutter, you call for the curveball. You can double down on these things in ways that you can't in the major leagues. And you can accept some bad results if he isn't able to regain that command in the moment. So I think that, that's the biggest counter argument to what Connolly was saying. I think that you do have the ability to make sure that he is not just essentially taking the easy way out at AAA, and you make sure that he can like find that conviction mentally to refocus himself and start to attack hitters the way that we all know he's capable of doing. We've seen him, put together successful starts. We've seen him put up zeros, and so we all know he's capable of it. I think that in terms of allowing him to work on those things, not letting the moment get too big for him, but then also in terms of load management, and making sure that he can step down, throw a couple outings that are just 75 pitches. I think this is also a good move from that standpoint, because I think, Elias obviously said we can't shut down 4/5 of our rotation in September. That is true, but if you need to shut down anyone, you be careful with the prized, top 10 prospect in all of baseball.
Yeah, I mean, I know some of the talk was that he hasn't quite looked like the same pitcher since the injury last year. That 98, 99 you were talking about, that seemed to be not as consistently happening after he came back from the injury last year. I know he didn't have the best spring. The Orioles sent him down. So I don't think the struggles didn't come out of nowhere. I think you're exactly right that he doesn't have the command, and when you don't have the command, you end up, that includes missing the plate entirely and missing your spot into the middle of the plate too. And he was just getting rocked. I mean, like his BABIP is massive, and that's sometimes when the BABIP's high, it's because you're unlucky. But in Grayson's case, it's because he was getting the snot hit out of him. I mean,
yeah,
it's just what happens. So I'm fine with it too. But Jess, I'm willing to hear if you have a differing opinion, or maybe just kind of what you're hoping for Grayson to work on.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we were worried strictly about Grayson's well-being and his development, I think I would have given him a few more starts to try to figure it out at the major league level. But the fact that the Orioles are trying to win games right now, I think that is really the key to why he got sent down. Like Eli was saying, if there is an issue, which there clearly is, about innings limitations and how much he's going to be able to pitch this year, I'd rather not have him pitching right now, pitching as poorly as he is, and I would just defer his innings to later in the season. So from that perspective, it works well too, when hopefully he's figured a couple things out and can be more effective in his limited innings that he does pitch for us. So I'm good with the move overall. I wonder how much the one start really had to do with it. I mean, he got absolutely rocked by the Rangers. Granted, the Rangers are a good offensive team, but he got rocked. He gave up like 9 runs in like 3 innings or something like that. So I wonder, I guess that was just the exclamation point at the end of the Orioles thought process that made the Orioles say, okay, yeah, it's time for you to go down. But no, I think it's the right move. I think the Orioles, of course, are still planning for him to play a role moving forward in the season. So yeah, but we sort of where the Orioles are at, we do need him to certainly be better than he has been. So it's important that he goes and fixes some things.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's also good to note that he's a rookie. Struggles happen. Kyle Bradish was pretty bad the early part of last year. He went on the IL, made a couple minor league starts, came back and was a lot better in the second half, and has been pretty good this year. And just because you're an uber prospect doesn't mean you can't go through some growing pains. So Yeah, we'll see what happens there. The rotation is in a bit of a mess right now with an open spot there. I don't know what they're going to do there. I could see a Bruce Zimmerman appearance. I know that's exciting for all of us. Drew Rom, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, what I can say is tomorrow, Wednesday. So like probably about the time this podcast is coming out, we will have the answer as to what's happening tomorrow. Yeah. But at the same time, tomorrow is the day that we need it, or else we will double up on the next man in the rotation, which should be Kramer, I think.
Yeah, Kramer is scheduled for Friday already.
Yeah, okay, so Kramer's scheduled for Friday. So tomorrow's going to have to be like, I don't know, you could throw Austin Voth out there, or you could do a bullpen game with the anticipation of the off day on Thursday.
Yeah.
I
the
think
problem
both
is
are possible.
The bullpen is still stretched right now. I mean, that's the problem with that.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, but we did just bring up Keegan Aiken too, who can give you 2 of those 9. So, I think that I don't know. It can go either way.
2 out of the 9. I mean, they still got to cover 7. I mean,
well, he said Voth.
Yeah.
There's Voth also who can give you another 2,
right?
And then you've got, I don't know. But the point is
still a lot, but yeah,
we can play with it a little bit because we have the off day on Thursday, and then I looked ahead. We also have an off day on Monday, so you can get by if you need to without committing to a 5th starter for another probably week or so.
Yeah, I gotta just say though, if Bruce Zimmerman is back on this team before Cole Irvin ever gets back on this team, or I'm just saying.
Cole Irvin was back on the team for a little bit. He just didn't pitch. They brought him up and sent him right back down.
He pitched 1 inning or whatever in the blowout.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I'm sorry, a third of an inning, I think it was.
But I'm just like, Zimmerman, I mean, I don't know. It just would feel like that was a complete bust of a trade. I know we still have Irvin like several more years. I know, but like if Bruce Zimmerman is getting back on the team ahead of him, I mean, come on.
Well, they didn't give up that much for him. I mean,
I know.
Darrell Hernandez, who is having a nice season in the athletics minor league system, but like we got to temper expectations. But look, I said it a long time ago. I wasn't like wild about the Cole Irvin deal anyway, but
right.
I get it.
But still, I don't know. It's just if Bruce Zimmerman gets there ahead of him, it's a spot
start, Jesse. Let's not go nuclear on.
Okay.
So to refocus a little bit, I will also say Grayson Rodriguez, in terms of hard hit percentage, just strictly the rate at which he is giving up, batted balls with exit velocities over 95 miles an hour. He is in the 1st percentile in the major leagues.
Elite.
Elite. No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
So when Tyler says he's getting rocked, I mean, he is like consistently getting rocked. He's in the bottom 10% of the league in average exit velocity, the hard hit percentage, his expected ERA and expected WOBA, expected batting average, expected slugging percentage, and how often hitters are barreling him up. So it's definitely, I don't know.
Not ideal.
He's in a rough place, right? Yeah. And I think some recalibration is warranted.
Yeah. Get in the lab, Grayson. Guys, let's just keep going with even more fantastic news here in our outline. A couple pitchers who we hope will have important roles on this team at some point are experiencing injury setbacks. That would be John Means and Dylan Tate. Means, of course, had Tommy John early last year, was on pace to come back sometime in July. That doesn't appear to be happening anymore. He suffered an injury in his scapula region. That's on the back, I think. So
Can confirm.
He's gonna take some time off there. It's sounding like July's off the table at this point. He wasn't. I think they asked him about August, and he was kind of unsure about that as well. But he did say he still anticipates pitching in the big leagues sometime this year, so we'll see.
I mean, the window is steadily closing, though, and
there's only one more month after August.
Yeah, right. We're running out of territory here to return.
So that's the John Means situation, and then on Dylan Tate's side, this has been an ongoing thing apparently since November. I think Mike Elias said Dylan Tate had a stress reaction now in his elbow, which is different from the flexor strain he was having way back in November that caused him to also miss the World Baseball Classic. His rehab assignment came to an end because I think it was basically a month long at that point, and you do get to a certain point where you kind of have to like make a decision there. Sounds like he's gonna take some time off and then do another rehab assignment. Just a bummer here, guys. Jess, I don't know. What are your thoughts about all these injuries and issues with the pitching staff?
Yeah, I mean, these are two critical guys, of course. I mean, Means alone, right, without even the Orioles making any moves at the deadline, would alleviate and be so useful and so critical to the Orioles, especially if he were to come back and, be what he's capable of being. I mean, there's your game one starter in the playoffs, or maybe a game two starter, if he is himself.
There's some respect to Kyle Gibson, please.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So plus if we are sort of in a playoff push, or we are trying to win some extra games for seeding for the playoffs and stuff like that, right, we're really going to need him. So it really is kind of a blow that the Orioles are going to have to sort of adapt to. And I do think that the timeline for his return at the point of the trade deadline will heavily inform what the Orioles decide to do at the deadline. If they can expect him back, and if they think that he's going to be himself, that will play critical roles, or that will be a critical piece of information the Orioles will use to decide what they're going to do and who they're going to acquire at the deadline. So I think that makes a big difference. And then, I mean, seeing a little bit of the bullpen getting overexposed here, I can only imagine what things would be like and how much better things would be if Tate was at the back end of our bullpen for us, to alleviate some of the pressure that Baker has been under to fill so many innings. And he's been struggling a bit, a decent amount of the time. So, I mean, we were excited because about the bullpen coming into the season. But there are like some long-term question marks. Of course, we've been benefited by, Coulomb. We've been benefited by Cano. But long-term, especially about the middle of the rotation, I mean, maybe people even still have questions about Cano long term. But sure, even if we take him and Bautista for granted and we say, no, they're going to be solid, the rest of the bullpen is very, very perilous. Of course, Perez has taken a big step back this year. Long term, I'm worried. And I think, of course, having a Dylan Tate would be, a tremendous help.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going a little overboard on the bullpen. The bullpen's quite good. I mean, like every bullpen has its issues, but the fact the Orioles have Cano struggled recently a little bit, but Cano, Bautista, Coulomb's been pretty darn good all year. Like, have three guys like that. Everything else you figure out. Baker will figure it out. But
yeah, I'm thinking about it more long term, right? Like, but
how long term can you think for a bullpen?
Well, the season.
Okay, that's not that long term, but I get what you're saying.
Okay, okay, yeah.
Yeah, at face value, I do agree with the point that, like, we are consistently relying on, like, if we're to call it, like, tiered, the back-end innings are coming from Cano and Bautista. That is awesome. That's great. The, like, middle-tier innings are coming from Baker and Coulomb. And I think predominantly those two.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Bauman's been a big addition. I should have included him there. But I think that Baker is the one who's like starting to show a little bit of cracks. The only question is, like, with a starting rotation that is consistently going less than 6 innings. Actually, on the note of less than 6 innings, Jesse jinxed the Kyle Gibson start. He went 5 2/3 today.
Unbelievable. I don't get my quality start in fantasy. Thanks, Jess.
Yeah, way to go, Jess.
We were on a streak there. He had 2 in a row. or 3 in a row.
He threw like 30 pitches through 3 innings. He was sailing,
Yeah, that's why you jinxed him. He would have done it if it wasn't for you.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, anyway. But so
Well,
with a starting rotation that consistently does not go 6 innings, continuing to like aggregate innings over the course of a season, I think that middle tier, like the Canoes and Bautistas are going to be protected a little bit because you are only going to use them in the high leverage situation. But those middle leverage guys, the 6th and 7th inning guys, I think those are where you will start to see the cracks because they become the 9th inning of a 4-run game, of a 5-run game. So I understand the long-term ramifications that, quote unquote long-term that Jesse's talking about there.
Yeah.
And there are concerns about all these guys being overused. I mean, the bullpen has had to pick up way too many innings for this point of the season. Yeah. So, yeah.
But I will go against you on one thing, Jess. I think that in my mind right now, John Means is a non-factor for 2023. And not that I don't want him to be a factor, but I think like if you are the Orioles front office, right, at this point, he's coming back no earlier than August. There seemed to be doubt on August. And so he will come back for like, say 1 month in September, and he will not have pitched on a big league mound in a year and a half. Right. And like, to me, you absolutely cannot count on that for any kind of production. Not to say like 2024 John Means won't be a different story. I think he very much will be a different story. But John Means is a total non-factor for me in 2023. As much as I love the guy and want him to be a factor and want him to be a game 2 starter in the playoffs, I don't necessarily think that's going to happen. And so I think
you're 100% right. I mean, let me just say that you're absolutely correct. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I mean, I'm hearing you talk about it, and I'm like, yeah. I mean, 100%. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
Right. So Mike Elias needs to go into the trade deadline and get like undoubtedly one top end starter, to fill in a 1 or 2 slot in a rotation. And that's like, it's almost mandatory. I think there's really no situation where we walk away from the trade deadline without that piece in hand and can call it a success. It's a clear need on the team. We have all of the prospect capital available, and we're contenders. If we have that piece, we become very, very legitimate contenders. Like, every power ranking coming out right now has us in the top 5 teams in the major leagues, and that's what it is. That's where we are. We are at that status, and we need to act accordingly.
Well, yeah, and bringing up the needing a starter thing is just becoming such a broken record. They've needed a starter,
right,
for a year. I mean, more than that, but you know what I mean. Like, since they've been pretty good, they were pretty good last year. They finished 2 games out of a playoff spot. They've needed a starter for forever. That's what makes this past offseason so frustrating, because it was glaringly obvious to everyone, and I'm sure including the Orioles front office, they needed a top line starting pitcher, and they just didn't go get one. Now, they're good right now, and we've talked about their run differential and the Pythagorean win-loss. They're lucky to be this as good as they are. They need to take advantage of where they are in the standings. They need to go get that starter. They needed to go get that starter even if John Means was healthy. He's not going to be healthy. And yeah, you're right. Even if he is healthy, who knows what kind of pitcher he is? You can't depend on him right now. They need to go do it, package up some of these prospects and do it. Like, it's that simple. It's been that simple for a long time now. So I hope they finally do. It's late May. We got 2 months until the trade deadline. That's our very next topic. So let's just go on. Obviously, the Means and Tate stuff is a big deal. When they come back, huge bonus, but that remains to be seen if and when that happens. So let's talk trade deadline, because Mike Elias got asked about it this week. And the kind of pull quote there is, we're definitely preparing all types of scenarios, and they're buy scenarios. So that's great. We didn't really learn anything there. Of course, they should be buy scenarios. They're 14 games over 500. Like, yes.
What kind of statement is that? Right.
But what he defines as buy, that is where the wiggle room lies, because I could very easily see the Orioles going, and I made a joke about this before. Did I say it on the podcast before? But Rich Hill, I could see that being a guy they go and buy. I could also see them go say, you know what, we need an upgrade over Ryan O'Hearn as our left-handed bench bat. We really need a guy that can come off the bench at the 9th inning for us.
I mean, in their minds, they might think that they went ahead and bought a top 100 prospect in Cade Povich last year. So
That's
we're
true.
not sure.
That's
I
true.
guess you can characterize anything as a buy, you know.
They bought Yenier Cano at the
Right,
the
they
deadline
bought
last
Yenny
year.
Arcano. That's
That was
right.
a huge addition to the 2023.
So
Yeah, so that was the big quote. Like I just said, we've got 2 months until the deadline, and the thing is, like, the speculation starts when you start to look at teams that are bad and the players that they could potentially get rid of. And the issue is that a lot of the bad teams are in the central divisions, but the central divisions are so bad that nobody's really out of it yet. Some of the names we've started to talk. I mean, I don't know, Eli. I don't know if I'll go to you first to talk about this, but do you have your eyes on anybody in particular that you'll be watching for maybe the next 8 weeks, 7 weeks, that you could potentially see them in an Orioles uniform by the time the calendar turns to August?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm largely going to bring up a lot of the same names that have been floating around in every, Orioles fan conversation about this. But, specifically because there are a couple notable teams struggling in the Central, specifically the Guardians and the White Sox. You bring up the names of Shane Bieber, Lucas Giolito, and Dylan Cease. Bieber and Giolito are both going to be free agents next year. And so, it would be entering into a rental situation. I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I think, you have the chance to build a rapport with them and have a better chance at signing them as free agents next year or signing them to an extension this year. But, Cease is an advantage for that reason. Cease, like, of the three, has struggled the most this year, but simultaneously, I guess you can't say. I think Bieber had a better season when he won a Cy Young, but probably the best recent season has been Dylan Cease's last year. He was absolutely incredible, and he's taken a lot of notable steps backward. But if you trust the Orioles or if you're going to trust one team in the MLB to mold a pitcher, it's going to be like the Rays, the Orioles, or the Guardians. So, hopefully you could rekindle some of what Cease had. And, he's only like, at this point, this season's only 2 months in. So he's not far removed from the last year version of himself at all. He still throws 96 to 98. He's still got a big breaking ball. So, he's still got the tools. He's still got one of the best sliders in the game. So I think that he's, like, enticing because of that. And he has the 2 extra years of control on top of it. So, I think that those 3 guys are in particular, like, the best combination of on a team that is struggling right now and high-end talent that we would look to and be enticed by and be willing to spend some prospect capital on. But all that said, like you said, Tyler, we're 2 months away from the trade deadline, and the Central is such an unbelievably bad division as a whole that you go ahead and you look at it, and it's still wide open. I think the Guardians are 5 games under 500, but they are only 3.5 games out of first place. So, it's So you don't really know where you're going to be. So speculating on these kinds of guys is, I don't know, kind of a fruitless task.
But it's fun to do it anyway.
But it's fun. I agree.
Yeah, I mean, that's I've talked about this on Camden Chat stuff and like comments and stuff, and it's tough to like just the teams that are really bad are just like so bad that there's nobody you even really want. Like the Athletics, I mean,
right.
There's nobody on those teams that is the traditional like veteran guy on the end of his contract that you're going to sell for, nothing. They don't even have those guys. And I mean,
not the Barry Zito days for the Oakland A's.
Well, yeah, but Zito he wasn't a trade guy. The Giants signed him to that massive contract.
Right. Yeah.
And then like the Nationals are bad, but all their pitchers are young guys that they're not going to get rid of. Mackenzie Gore and Josiah Gray, like they're good. They're not going to get rid of them. And then in like the Central, like Corbin Burns was the talk all offseason. Right. Like, I'll get Corbin Burns. Well, the Brewers are leading the Central and Brandon Woodruff's hurt. Like, they're not going to get rid of Corbin Burns. So, I don't know. We need some more stuff to shake out. See if the Padres start to blow things up. Maybe there's something there. Colorado, they stink. Maybe there's something there. But, yeah, I'm kind of...
Yeah, there's nothing in Colorado.
Well, there you go. Fair enough. Fair enough. I don't know, Jesse, what do you think? I mean, any offensive positions you want the Orioles to upgrade, Jess? I mean, we talked earlier about like lengthening the lineup, but I know we've got prospects we could bring up that could do that, but I don't know if you've got a position in mind. I mean, Mountcastle's been struggling a little bit. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's a very interesting question, and I mean it's really tough for the Orioles, I think, because they're sort of in a situation where, right, like if you go get someone for Mountcastle's position at first, right, well then there's just this giant problem of, well, what do you do with Mountcastle, right? And he just kind of flounders on the bench and isn't a big contributor, and in order for Mountcastle to be valuable to the team, he needs to hit. And if he's not doing that, then he doesn't really have much of a role on the bench. So, yeah, it's kind of tough. I mean, of course, the one position you could sort of hone in on is second base. Of course, we have Frazier, and he's been playing pretty well, and I've been impressed with him. But of course, there's an opportunity for an upgrade, but of course, we did just sign Frazier to a contract there, hopefully with the idea that he would do the job. So it'd be kind of weird. I mean, you could think with Mountcastle going down, well, except that's not going to be an issue during the trade deadline. So I was thinking maybe some outfield help, maybe in left. I mean, I always kind of worry about Hayes, and whether, I mean, he's playing great right now, but he really fell off at the end of the season last year, and it'd be nice to have a contingency plan if Hayes doesn't continue with his current success. So, I mean, there are kind of a lot of things, but it's I mean, kind of like we've talked about in previous episodes, it's kind of difficult to sort of predict a lot of times what these guys are going to do, just because, I mean, Hayes, I mean, the track record, suggests he is going to struggle, when we get to the end of the year. So, I don't know. It's tough, but, yeah, but there's a lot of variability in a lot of these guys, so it's hard to sort of hone in. But I think if the Orioles are going to do anything, like, a guy that would be flexible, that could sort of move around, that could be helpful. So if Frazier starts to struggle, or if Hayes starts to struggle, then you could kind of get a guy that, you move Arias over to second, and then you have an alternative, that kind of thing. You have someone you can plug in at third if Henderson starts to not, so I think you got to start thinking about options like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, that's why it's late May. There's so much time to go. There's so many things that could and will happen. And, I think we're going to have a big prospect call up sometime between now and the trade deadline, because I just think there's some that are pushing for it hard enough that it needs to happen. And that could solve some of the stuff you were just talking about, Jess. They've been moving guys like Jordan Westberg around, Connor Norby around. Colton Cowser plays all three outfield positions. So, that could solve an issue there.
I mean, the question is, to what extent are you gonna end up trusting a rookie, in the midst of a playoff push? So not that, so it's just, it's a tough situation.
It's exhausting.
It's hard to know what. It's hard to know what to do. So
at
least for
Fair
me,
enough.
I think it's hard to know what to do. So I was just gonna say, and as far as the starters getting a 1-2, I mean, like, to me, it doesn't. I mean, we were talking. Eli mentioned the names. Like, it doesn't matter. As much like which ones and stuff like that. I mean, as long as they are a solid 1 or a 2, and we expect that they're gonna, continue to perform at that level when they get here. If we get a solid 1 or 2, they are going to be probably a 1 for us. I mean, you had mentioned something before the podcast, Tyler. I was kind of curious about, not to divert from what you were going to say here, but I am kind of curious what your thoughts would be on you had made a comment about sort of the Orioles having limitations on what they would be willing to pay up for a rental or for a guy whose contract is up at the end of the year. So I know it seemed like you were going to say something and make a new point, but I was curious if you wanted to explore that too.
I think my thought on that is that the Orioles front office, I think, wants to support this current team and its winning ways as much as not necessarily as much as possible. They want to support it in any way they can, but they don't seem like a group that's going to mortgage the future to take advantage of a current opportunity, because I think they, at the end of the day, are always going to come back to the numbers. And if you look at a lot of numbers for the Orioles, yes, they are good. They're probably not quite as good as what their record would tell you they are. I think some of the players, Austin Hayes is a good example. If you look at some of his numbers, he's probably not quite as productive as he looks like on paper right now. So I don't see the front office necessarily treating this like a 100-win team. I think they treat them more like a wild card 2 or 3 that's going to win 85 to 90 games. And okay, we can maybe do a rental to get to that point, but we're only going to give up so much to get there. So I think Lucas Giolito is a very good example. Going to be a free agent, right? Is having a nice season, has a track record prior to last year being really good. I think on a lot of teams in the league, he is a number 2, and that's super valuable at the trade deadline. I think the Orioles have the most prospect capital probably to get a deal like that done, but are they going to be the ones that are willing to do that? I don't know. That doesn't seem very Mike Elias and Sig Mejdal to me. I think the Orioles, they seem to want to come back to believing in their system and the way they build teams, and that just seems to be what they're going to default to. Now, I don't know. I would see. I look at the Orioles prospect situation and I say we got a ton of really good hitters, and that's awesome, but we've only got 9 positions on the field. We don't have a ton of great, intriguing pitching prospects, so I'd be willing to trade hitters for pitchers, but I could see the argument of it's got to be a pitcher with multiple years of team control, or else what are we doing? So
Right.
I could see the Orioles dipping their toe in the trade market for a pitcher with multiple years of team control, but just probably not for a rental, because I just don't think that's the way they roll, because they've always got that long-term look for things.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's all right. Go on.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, I agree. I think the Orioles front office is very well aware that yes, we're really good right now. We're gonna be even better next season, right? So if we're gonna do anything, right, we would, sort of we're not gonna give up a legitimate prospect who could be a real contributor for us in 2 or 3 years to just boost us a little bit this year, right?
Right.
I agree 100%.
Exactly. So we'll see. We have a couple more episodes before the deadline gets here. We'll certainly talk about any rumors that come up, and get our thoughts and analysis and all that stuff out.
Can I throw out one more name?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
How about bringing back Jock Peterson talk? Not bringing him back, bringing back the talk.
Bringing back the talk of...
Yeah, we were talking about him just over the offseason as
right.
somebody to sign.
But
like when you talk about lengthening a lineup, I think that's about as good as you can get. And the Giants they haven't been bad, but they've been like middling. And I know he's on a 1-year deal, so...
Yeah, I know he's been hurt a good amount. He's been on the IL, I think, twice this year already. But
I missed that. Okay.
Yeah, I'm a fantasy owner of Jock Peterson, and it's been a bummer on a couple occasions, because he's been pretty productive as he usually is offensively. But yeah, he's been hurt a couple times. But no, I don't think that's a bad idea. I don't know about Anthony Santander and Jock Peterson coexisting on the same roster.
Right. It gets a little corner outfield, first base, DH log jammed.
Yeah. And then
Jock definitely can play first base. So what you were talking about with the left-handed bat taking the place of Ryan O'Hearn, he's definitely a super version of that.
I would be into that. Yeah, I could talk myself into that, replacing Ryan O'Hearn with Jock Peterson. Sure.
Yeah, but then that means you're sitting Mountcastle. I mean, you're not going to get Jock Peterson to back up Mountcastle.
No. It's like Santander's in right, Jock is the DH, and Mountcastle's at first, and Adley's catching.
Yeah, except you can't do that every day because Adley can't catch every day.
Yeah,
mean-
for sure.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
You switch things around. Yeah, it's not in
Right.
stone.
Right.
And
Okay.
I mean, you're trading for, yeah, he's a hired gun at that point. You put him where you want to put him different days of the week. And
Right.
yeah, I like that. I like that.
He
and
could
I
maybe
wouldn't,
even throw him over and left if he had to. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know, not a Camden Yards. I don't know. It's a lot of space out there.
That's true.
A lot of space out there.
I
But yeah.
go ahead, Tyler.
No, I was moving on to the next thing. What else?
Okay,
You got?
I was just gonna randomly note that I mean Eli said that I jinxed him with the whole Gibson thing, but I mean the Orioles game, I said we were gonna win this game or alluding to that, and it's tight, and the Orioles had to bring in Cano. It's a 3-1 game, so they might be bringing in Bautista, but exactly what we were saying, the middle of the the middle innings guys, Baker and Coulomb really struggled. So,
Yes.
anyway, yeah.
Thank you for the play-by-play.
Well, I don't know. It just weaved so well into, what we had been talking about. So I felt like I had to mention it, but yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, we can reiterate Jesse jinxed all of this.
Yeah.
Kyle Gibson would have gone 8 scoreless
Right.
if Jesse hadn't opened his mouth.
Hadn't said anything. Yep.
Ridiculous.
Yep. And now we're using all our back end guys. So
yeah, it's a bummer. They'll be all right. We're gonna get the win here, guys. Don't worry.
Okay.
It's gonna be great.
I don't eat those
We're just
words.
gonna expend our entire bullpen to do it, but
Yeah,
that's fine.
let's
We only
wrap
think
this-
about today anyway, so we don't think about tomorrow. That's the Orioles.
Well,
way,
that's
so.
they play everybody every day, so
Yeah.
that's how it goes. Let's just wrap it up by talking about the City Connect jerseys. I know this is a bit of outdated news by this point, but we're a bi-monthly podcast, so that's how it goes. The Orioles did release and debut their City Connects this past week. There had been kind of a leak on them a few weeks ago or months ago, maybe, of what the jersey looked like. And the reality was somewhat similar, although I think it was better than what the leak indicated. A black jersey, seemingly all black, but on the inside there's a pop of color that was meant to reflect the vibrancy and the artistry of the city and also the neighborhoods of the city. And then there was also a B cap, which is the same script as the away jersey B for Baltimore. And then the black jerseys here just read Baltimore on the front in a font that I believe was taken from like the press collection at MICA, the Maryland Institute College of Art, to connect there. And then there's the phrase, "You can't clip these wings," both at the bottom of the jersey and inside the hat lining. A lot of consternation. I think that's the second time I've said consternation on this pod. People didn't love it. Eli, I'll get your initial thoughts. What did you think about the City Connects, both maybe the reveal and then what they actually look like on the players on the field?
I think they look fine. I think that totally dumping on them is worse than they deserve, but I do kind of just at face value have a problem with like the most exciting part of the thing. And, I get the metaphor of like, as you said, artistry and vibrancy of the city kind of being hidden behind this like more, I don't know, industrial and et cetera, face. But at the same time, it's like, that is clearly what makes the jersey cool.
Yeah.
And, if you are intending that the Orioles wear these with the end of their sleeves rolled up a little bit, just like stick that trim on the end of the sleeve and say, it quote unquote hints at what's beneath. You can keep the metaphor going, you can do all this, and you can just have that on the jersey.
Yeah.
I don't really understand. Like, I think they took it too far, putting the most exciting part of the jersey in a place where you cannot actually see it.
Ultimately, it's about aesthetics, right? So
right,
we have to judge it by what we're actually looking at, right?
Well, right, and the leak was like, the reason everyone was like, "Oh, this is so boring," is because none of that was turned out, so you couldn't see that the inner lining of it was actually all these pretty colors, and all you saw was a black jersey with white like block lettering on it, basically.
And the block lettering said Baltimore, and which they already have a jersey that says Baltimore.
We do. We
why
have
not
one of
like
those.
a nickname? And I'm a bit of a sucker. I work in marketing, so I'm definitely a sucker for like the marketing of it. I get it. Like it does jive with how people view the city of Baltimore. Like I just went to a work thing in San Diego a couple weeks ago, and you're mingling with people that you only ever see on the computer, but you're chatting, and, where are you from? I'm here. Oh, and when you say like, yeah, I say I'm from Maryland, like just north of Baltimore, which is true. I don't like try to pose as if I live in the city because I don't. But when you just talk about Baltimore to somebody from California, they're like, they know, first of all, they know nothing about the city. And if they do, it's The Wire. I've seen The Wire.
Yep. That's all
That's it.
outsiders know. Right.
And, you know, so this jersey kind of is that in a jersey. Like the outside, all black, dark. Baltimore gets shit on nationally all the time, whatever. And then, as a local who you can go and walk around the neighborhoods and stuff, there is a bunch of vibrant stuff. You can go see really cool stuff beyond just the inner harbor. There's more to Baltimore City than just the inner harbor. You know what I mean? Like, so I do get it. But yeah, when you looked at the players on the field, the guys that looked the coolest were the guys with the socks up and the sleeves rolled up where you could actually see the color. Whereas like Adley wore all everything just down because that's how he wears his uniform, and that's fine. But it looked kind of boring. So yeah, they needed to approach it a little bit differently for it to really pop. But I will say the hats are going to be crazy popular. Those are going to be huge. Everybody's going to be wearing those hats because people have wanted a bee hat for a long time. My dad always talked about wanting a bee hat. So they're going to be huge, huge around the city. And in that regard, definitely a success. But Jess, any additional thoughts there? You didn't really give your take yet.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I feel like normally you guys would expect that I would dislike something like this. I'm thinking back to the celebration conversation. But I mean, and there is proper context for me disliking this because, me and Eli grew up in a household where Nike was despised. There is sort of this context for us not liking it, but I actually like it. I mean, I mean, right. I wish that we could see the really great part of the jersey, but I like the aesthetic of it. I like just the black. I think it really looks cool. The Orioles had that photo shoot, and I thought the pictures came out, I mean, really cool there. And the jerseys, I will say, I do think the jerseys looked cooler in the photo shoot than they do like on the actual field and stuff like that. but regardless, no, I think the jerseys are cool. Sure, I think it could have maybe been there could have been a little more than just like the plain black, right? But overall, I mean, I have no real complaints about the jerseys. I liked how they look. So,
all right, here's a question from me. What are your guys' takes on the black pants?
I mean, it does look like softballish a little bit, but it's kind of just part of like the City Connect stuff. With a lot of them are the same like color pants as the shirts. Aren't the Dodgers ones all blue? Everything. Right. So
I just think that, yeah, I guess it was. It's funny. Adley was the one that was in my head too. It like, when he's wearing the pant legs down and then black cleats, it's just you're just one solid color.
Yeah, it looks like
the
a
whole way down.
Yeah.
And I think this would have looked really phenomenal with white pants. Maybe not phenomenal, but like better.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
And a black stripe or the multicolored stripe down the side, whatever.
Well, because I do think like some of the fans have been buying. Obviously, the fans aren't buying pants to go with it. They're just buying the jersey, and I think like that seems to look kind of cool walking around the park. Like the Baltimore looks cool in the sun. Sometimes it looks a little bit like more gray than like black. I've seen some pictures, and I'm like, oh, that looks kind of like a gray jersey is kind of a neat idea. But yeah, I don't think it's a terrible jersey. I don't.
Yeah,
right.
I think it's cool. It's better with the sleeves rolled up. They needed a little more color, but some of the hate it's getting, like we talked about this before, I think the Dodgers City Connects are way worse. They're like straight up just, they added a word, lost Dodgers instead of Dodgers. Like that's bad. Yeah. I think the Giants one's bad. People love the Rockies one. I don't love the Rockies one. So like, and that's kind of the point of this whole thing is it gets people talking. chatting about baseball on social media. So in that regard, it's a huge success. And I think locally, all these jerseys are probably received pretty well, and people buy the crap out of them. So, yeah, at the end of the day, it's just a fun thing that doesn't really matter. But
Are you gonna get one, Tyler?
I'm not a big jersey guy.
Mhm.
Like I don't know, I might get like a t-shirt or something related to the City Connect stuff, but I'm not a huge jersey guy of any kind, just because I find them like kind of hot and uncomfortable, and I'd rather just wear a t-shirt to the game. So I probably won't, but if you're a
Right.
jersey person, I would get one, sure.
I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't dislike it. I mean, and I know the hats are going to be everywhere, so yeah.
Great.
All about it. Cool. Jesse, are you going to get any of this stuff? You don't really buy things.
No, probably not. Yeah.
If you
Probably
find one
not.
somewhere that you'd wear it.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm walking on the street and
Yeah.
one is just chilling somewhere, then
Yeah.
maybe I'll.
Jesse
And
is
I could tell it doesn't belong to somebody, and I'm not stealing it from somebody.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that 98% of the Orioles memorabilia that Jesse owns is
giveaways.
free giveaways. And so like I think, there might be a Jason Birkin still in rotation.
Oh yeah, Brad Bergeson.
Brad
all
Bergeson,
that.
maybe
Yeah.
some Koji Uehara in there.
Well, see,
Yeah.
that's a good one though.
Yeah.
We do have we still have the Hyunsu Kim one in Korean.
That's a good one too.
Yeah.
Felix PA. I've seen that one.
Felix PA, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One, and I should say we're recording this podcast. Jesse's wearing a Seattle Sounders shirt. I don't know Jesse to be a Seattle Sounders fan, so I would assume that was free as well, in some way, shape, or form.
Well, I think actually my mom was in Seattle and got it for me, so
so
the
for you
green
it was
looks
free.
cool.
For you it was free.
Yeah. So yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So if you see Jesse on the streets of currently New York is where he is, Venmo him some $30 for a City Connect jersey.
I wore this shirt all day today actually. So yeah.
What does that have to do with anything?
Yeah, well, normally you wear a shirt all day.
No, just that I would have been seen in New York City, wearing the shirt.
Okay.
In the Sounders. He was the guy in the Sounders shirt, if you saw
exactly,
that.
Yeah.
So
if someone ran into me, the one New York listener we have,
Yeah, we go ahead and we record every single morning and we just update on what shirt Jesse is going to be wearing that
We'll
day.
just tweet out a picture of Jesse on Twitter every day.
Right.
OOTD. That's Jesse. All right, boys. Well, that's about all we've got for this week's episode. We're as we're recording, the Orioles are still eking out this game against the Guardians. Let's take a look at their upcoming schedule before we record next. Because as we've said, we normally do this every 2 weeks or so. So the Orioles wrap up May against these Guardians. Then they're going to be off on Thursday before heading out west and playing a 3-game set in San Francisco against the Giants, 3 more in Milwaukee against the Brewers, and then back home for a 3-game set against the Royals. So the schedule's a bit easier these next 2 weeks. Let's hopefully take advantage and, win 2/3 of those. That'd be great. But we'll see.
Figure out who that 5th starter is.
Yeah. I mean, with 2 off days, they don't really need a 5th starter for a little bit, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So, well, no, I guess
I made that point earlier and then just ignored it right here. So,
well, no, they'll need one in the stretch of Brewers and Royals. That's 6 straight days with a game. They'll need some. They could do a bullpen game, I guess, but that'd be a bit of a mess. So,
agreed.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll have our answer by the next time we record, and maybe we'll know more about Cedric's injury and all that jazz. But we'll cover it all as we get the news. So yeah. If you guys want to support the podcast, please subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can also go to thewarehousepod.substack.com, sign up with your email address, and you'll get the podcast emailed to you instead. Or you can do both. You can both subscribe and give us our email. You can also follow the podcast on Twitter at thewarehousepod, where Eli is crushing stuff over there. So yeah, that's about it. Until next time, this has been the Warehouse Podcast. I'm Tyler.
I'm Jesse.
And I'm Eli.
Thanks for listening.